Welcome into episode 207. Be sure you're following us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at @ByCASimmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. This already feels like it's going to be a weird podcast because Christian and I are recording it at 8:17 p.m. on Thursday night.
Yeah, we
Just
are.
kind of one of the more oddly timed ones we've had just due to circumstances. But how are you?
I'm doing well. Not really. The circumstances are entirely mine. Life's been lifing, so we've been trying to get a podcast in this week, and we have gotten it in. To our YouTube audience, hello again, since we haven't posted on YouTube in 2 weeks. I'm hoping this gets posted on YouTube. We've been having some technical difficulty issues there, which have been frustrating. If you're wondering about my background, it's because I am at my parents' house dog sitting because they are in Europe, and there are two dogs that at any given point in this podcast may just start barking. So there's that to be aware of as well. I think
It's
I've covered all the reasons that I'm very
yeah,
stressed out right now about this
it's a
podcast.
Pegasus Podcast throwback because when we started this, I was with my parents for a while and there was a dog that would bark constantly.
Yep.
And yeah, so we're a little bit of a throwback.
And when you told me that before we started recording in an attempt to comfort me, I pointed out to you that at that point in time there was a door in between you and that dog, and that is not the case in my current setup. So we'll just hope and pray for the best. But this is how committed we are to the Pegasus podcast, as we were moving hell and high water to get an episode in this week. And
Yeah, and my message to the YouTube audience is the last time you saw me, my facial hair was probably much shorter, and I looked more in order. I had actually had product in my hair. Like I've put little effort into my appearance for this podcast. Just got home from the gym, took a shower, and now we're here. So this is the podcast. This is the Pegasus podcast at its finest, I think.
this feels like a throwback to the old days, like the 2021 Pegasus podcast, where we were still like sort of getting our act together, because I feel like it is not together this week.
Even now, I think our not together now is just still way better than our not together back then.
I hope so.
I think that's the case. But yeah, we'll talk today, as you guys might have noticed from, I think it was from your account that you tweeted that, from Christian's account, his tweet on Wednesday, asking for some input about Big 12 brands and Big 12 programs as a whole. We're kind of going to look at where UCF falls in the landscape. We initially had, and we probably will still go by this and then get into what everybody's response was. We had initially picked out some teams on our own that were who we view as the top tier of the Big 12. At least we're talking football, obviously. And we had picked these teams, and then Christian put out the tweet like, who do you think is the top tier brands in the Big 12? And the answers varied like a lot. There was a lot of variation from each other and from us. So we'll get into that in a little bit. We'll start with comparing UCF to these four programs who we deemed to be the top tier. It's our podcast. We can start there. Kansas State, Utah, Oklahoma State, and TCU. And this idea came from a podcast we did, I guess it must have been around this time last year, where we were comparing UCF to BYU, Cincinnati, and Houston as far as who was the most Big 12 ready of the newcomers. And I guess I didn't really think about it. We could have done a different podcast comparing, I guess, UCF going into year 2 versus the newcomers this year going into year 1 in the Big 12, but we didn't do that. So Kansas State, Utah, Oklahoma State, TCU, our defined top tier.
Which I should point out, because I'm sure there are people listening who are like, how could they not include West Virginia or whatever? Because I was very surprised by some of your tweets. It's completely subjective. We've talked about it a billion times. This conference, what's ridiculous about it is that all of the 16 teams are largely interchangeable from fan base size and football investment and performance on the field. And we didn't even agree. You sent me your list at first and you had Texas Tech on it. And I was like, what the hell is Texas Tech doing
I had
on this
Texas
list? They don't
Tech
win. And then a bunch of
because
people
of recruiting.
And then a bunch of people replied Texas Tech to my tweet. So maybe you were right. I do think these are the four that in the last 10, 15 years have definitely had the most on-field success and also all have pretty strong fan bases. So I think
so.
They're a fair top four to compare UCF to. I think you'd agree that if I polled a random, well, maybe not, but most UCF fans that understand the sport, if I polled them and was like, do you hope that in 3 or 4 years UCF is like Utah or UCF is like Oklahoma State, that they would say, yeah, I'd like that.
Yeah.
And so hopefully maybe that's how we should have done this, actually. I don't
know. We're famous for having an idea that we like then kind of fully define or end up defining it on the podcast. I mean, it's too late for that.
Yeah, but this is a thing that it's one of my life philosophies, and I feel it's made for some very good podcasts and some podcasts where we take a survey live and it goes badly. But I'm a big believer in not defining things clearly, because I think it makes better conversation. But now we're in the point where I'm like, well, we'll see. I was either right or this is going to be a terrible podcast. Only time will tell.
Yeah, the kind of the lenses that we looked at this through is recruiting, NIL, fan support, coaching stability, and like you said, on-field success, winning tradition, and kind of just the trajectory that they've been on for the last 5 to 10 years. And I mean, there's a lot that we put into this research-wise, only to have everyone be like, BYU and West Virginia are better than all these teams. But we'll get into this stuff first, some of the information that we dove into, and then we'll talk about some of the
Didn't we
responses that
say
we
what
got.
the is determining how close UCF is to this and what UCF has to do to sort of
Yeah, I mean,
ascend to
kind of
that
just
level?
comparing
Okay.
UCF to
Yeah.
this as we defined it, top
The
tier of the
top
Big
of the
12.
Big 12
Yeah.
in our minds and no one else's apparently.
So so if you want to start, we can just start with recruiting and the level that UCF's recruiting at. And initially, like I said, why I put Texas Tech up there is because we've talked about on this podcast, UCF and Texas Tech lately have been the two that are kind of dominating recruiting in the Big 12. And that's
Yeah.
been obviously a small sample size, but it was so interesting doing this research because you see some of these teams that we look at as, these big top programs in the Big 12. Some of them just have not been recruiting that well. Like it's and I know because recruiting isn't everything. Obviously, a lot of it is development and just kind of how things play out. But some of these teams, like UCF's already recruiting better than them. Like if we want to go back to 2021 or 2022, let's say, UCF was fourth out of these five teams. They were 52nd. Only below them was Kansas State at 63. TCU was at 45. Utah was at 34. And Oklahoma State was at 29. But after that, some of like Oklahoma State's fallen off recruiting wise.
Yeah,
And
that
I didn't know that.
I literally, you sent me when you did that research, you sent it to me and I just replied, what's happening in Stillwater? I don't know. That is interesting, especially since they're coming off a season where they were unexpectedly very good. People thought they were going to kind of be a mess and they ended up being the second best team in the conference. Now,
Yeah, they were 56 this year in recruiting.
yeah, which there are caveats here because I think that it's absolutely fair to say that when we talk about what UCF has to do to be a top tier program in the Big 12, to be competing for playoff spots year in and year out, everything that goes into that. Am I fair in saying the area where they're doing best as far as all the factors that you would consider there is recruiting?
I 1000%. Yeah.
And there's two ways you can look at it. It's the standard I use that some of you don't like about, compared to how the other new teams are doing, the ones that came from the group of five to the Big 12. And UCF's not just outpacing them by a lot. UCF's outpacing the whole conference. I mean, they're 2024, I didn't think was a fluke, but it still makes you wonder a little bit when they just did that much better. They finished third in the Big 12 in the recruiting rankings behind Texas Tech and TCU. They really had a better class than TCU. 247, the way the classes are calculated, which I'm not going to start a whole argument about, is the size of the classes weighted pretty heavily, and UCF still likes to leave more room for the portal in other schools. So TCU got just bumped over them because they had more players, but it was really them and Texas Tech. And now we're kind of, I mean, this summer it's going to really heat up, but we're pretty deep into the 2024 cycle here, and UCF is once again out recruiting the rest of the conference. I mean, the On3 had some video with an expert they posted earlier this week about how UCF is just like running laps around the Big 12 in recruiting. Like this is the area where they are,
Yeah.
and it's probably a good area to be having that success.
It is because I mean, as much as and it kind of goes into it as NIL, but as much as that stuff and as much as everything else matters, like at the end of the day, it is players,
Yep.
and that's what's going to largely determine your success, and a lot of it's coaching too. But I mean, just the pace that UCF is on, and we've talked about it on the podcast, like over the last 3 years, it was like, oh, this is the best recruiting class they've ever had, and then the year after that is the best recruiting class they've ever had, and it's like they just keep topping themselves. And I wonder, like at some point, there has to be a ceiling, right? Like they just can't keep climbing, but you don't know. Like I mean, I guess they start having some success in the Big 12, and I guess that's when you start to see it get even better.
Yeah,
But
I mean, one thing and honestly, I remember that after last year's class, which finished 35th, I think I've been saying on the podcast that I felt like this coming class, 2025, was going to be the class that really breaks the streak of every single year Gus signs the best class ever, just because I'm like, I think 35 is probably their ceiling for now. And it's very early, but their 2025 class is 23rd. And they're in it for a lot of very, very big players. So they just keep upping it. And I think part of it is the way that college football has changed a little bit, because we've talked about how NIL becoming pay for play was sort of the worst timed thing ever for UCF, because we used to talk about my whole childhood about how if UCF got to the Power 5 level, they would be able to get anybody. Like that's what's missing. Yeah. They're in this hotbed of recruiting, like everything that goes into that, everything in the program. And they got that label right as paying players became a thing. And they obviously do not have the money of those other top tier programs, but And the last year and a half in particular, and big NIL for high school recruits has really started to die down because just as teams learn about how this works, NIL has really become a retention thing and
As
you've seen that
programs
with
begin to
UCF.
get sued.
Yes. I mean, that actually doesn't have anything to do with it, but we're still going to make fun of Florida for,
Yeah.
if you don't know, we're talking about Jaden Rashada is suing, like not just Florida, like directly suing Billy Napier for how his insane recruiting went down. And some of the documents came out. You guys should look at them because there's some hilarious stuff that is in there. But it really is NIL focusing so much more on retention and about like keeping your current players has meant that there isn't as much going to high school. Now the top tier guys, like the 5 stars, are still getting a lot of money, but 247 a while ago did an anonymous survey with all of these like top 100 high school players, and it wasn't none, but almost none of them said that they took the highest monetary offer that they received. So as NIL has kind of not been as much of a play for high school recruiting, I feel like that's part of why we're seeing UCF rise up, is that they don't have to, they're not just beat out the gate because they don't have Ohio State's money when they're in a recruiting battle with them or something like that.
Yeah, and that's essentially, I think you're the one that did you looked into like recruiting budgets and all that. Do you want to get through that kind of stuff as we're on the topic of recruiting? Because
Yeah.
I guess I wasn't super surprised, but I mean, of these programs we talked about, save for TCU, because TCU's, I always forget which schools in the Big 12 are private.
Oh, can I
It's,
do it?
yeah,
TCU,
yeah.
Baylor,
I mean, I don't know the
BYU.
answers, so I don't know if you're gonna miss any.
That's actually a good point. There's no one to fact check me. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure it's TCU, Baylor, and BYU. I think those are the
Okay.
three private schools. I
So
think everyone else
TCU's
is public.
numbers we don't have.
We do not.
Yes.
And I tried to find even like colloquial stuff or like reporting. There's just nothing. I mean, they're a small Christian private school. They don't have to tell the
Yeah.
world anything if they don't want to.
Right.
But recruiting budgets we did have for Utah, K-State, Oklahoma State, and UCF. This is for 2023. Utah 2.27 million, K-State 1.69 million, Oklahoma State 1.58 million, and UCF 1.57 million. So they're in, like, Utah is way ahead of everybody, but they're in there with Oklahoma State and K-State. And as recently as 2019, UCF's recruiting budget was 800K. So they have really, I mean, they've doubled their budget essentially in the last 4 years, which is and obviously that has to do both with going up a level, but I also think Gus probably came in and was like, guys, we're going to need some more money to get this done. But that again, it's another spot where they don't feel far off from the top of the league.
Yeah, and I mean, that's encouraging. I think if we kind of want to segue a little bit into another thing you looked up was donor contributions, and that's kind of where they are, at least lagging behind a little bit in this. What?
Yes, I was just gearing up to say things. And I don't know why I decided to gear up while you were still talking. And
no, I was kind of giving it away to you because you were the one who looked into this.
Yeah. This should not come as a surprise to anyone who's listening to this podcast, but the number one area of concern for UCF's financial situation, I feel like, is they still lag so much in donor contributions compared to pretty much everyone else in the Big 12. And I pulled the numbers. I don't have them right in front of me now. I pulled the numbers for the entire Big 12 a couple weeks ago, and it's bad. And we can talk about why in a second, but just for the schools we're talking about here, again, TCU is a private school, but again, they are well known. They have money. That is not a concern for them. UCF for 2023 reported donor contributions of $14.62 million. I should point out that this is before that really big donation they just got. And I also want to point out that when this is reported, it's as far as I understand it, this is like the actual money they received in that year. Like, for example, when you see an announcement where it's like, oh, a donor has pledged $25 million to UCF, they might be getting paid that over a decade, over 5 years, whatever. So as far as I understand it, this is the number of money they actually got in that year. So UCF, $14.62 million. Kansas State, $26.07 million. Utah, $34.9 million. Oklahoma State, $46.44 million. And pretty much all of the Big 12 is up in that Utah, Kansas State range. It's a problem that they are that far behind, especially because as you look at the way the college football landscape is changing and how the SEC and Big Ten are separating themselves from a financial standpoint, the donor contributions are kind of how you try to make up the difference from your TV deal, and UCF just isn't getting it done.
Yeah, and that I mean, I guess it wasn't a huge surprise, just given what how much Terry and everybody's had to push for, like, please give us money.
Yep.
But I think it was just kind of like you see the recruiting budget and how like UCF. I looked at it and I was like, UCF's up there, like they're along, like they're up there with OK State and with Kansas State. And then you sent me this, and I was like, okay, so this is the, like you said, the area of concern. And I mean, I would imagine, I'm sure you have probably more insight into this, or at least, more well thought out reasonings is behind this, but is it largely just because of how young UCF is as a program and as a like alumni base, I guess. It's
Yeah.
just a lot of young alums.
And I should point out the number has been going up, particularly since this administration took over. I looked up for 2018, or for 2019, excuse me, UCF reported 10.87 million. So it's incrementally going up. It's just nowhere near those other programs. There are different theories as to why this is the case and if it will ever be corrected or not. But what you just brought up about the age of the alumni base, yeah, that's definitely part of it. I know that it's a big bragging point for UCF. It's actually just been starting to creep up a bit. I don't think it's in the 30s anymore, but how UCF's alumni base, the average alumni is 40 or something like that. And it's a very, very young, very, very young alumni base. That's true, but it also means that you lack everyone who's rich, because people don't really get rich in their 20s and 30s and early 40s. Usually it's when, your peak earning years are your 50s, your 60s are when you're like, why don't I start spending all the money on my favorite sports team? So that's part of it, is that UCF is churning out a lot of alumni and a lot of UCF athletics fans, but they just need more time to get rich. The other thing is that look at Oklahoma State, right? Oklahoma State has been playing football for a century. They have people donating money to their program whose dad went to Oklahoma State games, and their dad went to Oklahoma State games, and their dad went to Oklahoma State games. It's these teams and these schools that are so embedded and ingrained in their respective communities and the culture of those communities that it's just different. It means a different thing to be an alum of that school. It means a different thing to help their athletic program succeed. UCF is about 20 to 25 years into really having any kind of legitimate sports fan base. And I do not want to discredit people who were sports fans of UCF athletics before that period. I'm talking about going from you have a group of diehards for a commuter school to having an actual large, general, more national fan base. They are very, very new to that. And it's just people need more time to build that lifetime connection and to get richer for UCF, I think, to really be able to compete in that area. That all you can say is it's just going to have to take time.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, using Oklahoma State as an example, like it's so ingrained in that culture. Like I haven't been there. I haven't been to any of these Big 12 cities, but I imagine you go to Stillwater, you go to places like that, and that is like that's everybody there is like there's Oklahoma State flags on them.
Yep.
Like, I think UCF's footprint in Orlando has obviously grown a lot, but again, it's one of those things where they're like still new into that and really becoming Orlando's team. And Orlando's such a big city that's like it's always going to be still going to be a lot of Florida State, a lot of Florida, a lot of people from everywhere. And some of these smaller places are just always going to be obviously built around they're college towns. And so I think that's almost an inherent disadvantage, but that also comes with its own advantages too. So it's a little bit.
And it's just the difference. Because like you said, it's like a lot of these towns are really more a college was built there and a town grew up around it. And that's obviously not UCF's experience in Orlando. It never will be. You look at one of the few Big 12 programs doing worse than UCF is Cincinnati. They reported 11.94 million. We just went to Cincinnati. I was surprised actually how not a factor they were in that city. I'm really, me, I love hating on Cincinnati. This even isn't that. We talked about it while we were there. You just don't see Cincinnati flags, Cincinnati t-shirts, Cincinnati anything in the city. It's like they just don't exist.
I think because we had lunch like was right off campus. I think the pizza place that we ate at was really good. There was like the Ohio State game was on during that and was just filled with like Ohio State people.
Yeah. This was like a Cincinnati Bearcats pizza place, like for game days, and there were plenty of Ohio State fans in there.
I think we saw people walking on campus in Ohio State gear, like at the game in Ohio State gear. And I mean, I think that's you know better than I do because you were around when you were younger. You were around UCF when you were younger. But obviously it's gotten a lot better with UCF as far as people on campus wearing UCF stuff and not necessarily I go to UCF, but I'm still a fan. But
I would say that as recently as probably 15 years ago, you'd still see that. Regularly. Sure. And it's so funny. Like I think one example of what I'm talking about, especially with legacy and all of that, is that I think I've said on this podcast, I've said many times on this podcast, I'm a second generation UCF alum. My dad went to UCF before me, hence why I've been obsessed with this, school and program and all that my whole life. I don't know many people who that's true for. I can probably count on one hand the people I've met in my life who they went to UCF and their parent also went to UCF. If you go to the state of Oklahoma, if you go to the state of Texas, you're going to find a lot more legacy alums. You're going to find just dozens upon dozens of people just in any general circle who, my mom went to the school and so did I, or my parents met on campus or whatever. UCF's just too young for that. They're only about 20, 25 years out from being a commuter school. They're on the right trajectory, but it's just frustrating that you want that money now. And I don't think it's a fundraising issue. I don't think it's why hasn't Mahajer tried this? Why
Right.
aren't they
Oh,
doing that? I
he's
think it's just the
tried
money
everything, I
needs
think.
time to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, again, it's one of those things that just takes time. And that's where it does get frustrating, where it's like, yeah, I mean, in, I don't know, 50 years, like it'll be better. But then there's also still going to be like all these other programs that have had
That have
money for
just
longer are going to have more money.
I got in an
So,
argument with I hope he doesn't mind me saying I got an argument with maybe I won't say who it is because I don't know if they might sing or not. I got an argument with someone about this like a year ago because I said that I'm not worried about this because I know it's going to get better over time. I know that just the sheer number of alumni who are fans of UCF athletics as they get older and richer, the money will come. And their big argument was, yeah, but everyone else's fan bases are also just going to keep topping what they're already doing. They're never going to catch up. And I don't know if that's true now because I also you look at the ages of some of these other alumni and their money's almost trending in the wrong direction in some ways. I mean that like when you have an alum that there's kind of a line you want to toe where you want your alumni base to be old enough where they can donate a lot of money, but not so old that they're all just dying off. And I don't know. I think that UCF has the chance to catch up. I don't know if they're ever going to be like Texas Tech has oil money, man. They've got all these,
mhm.
so until the energy crisis of the late 21st century, I don't think that's going anywhere. So I think that it's just they're always going to be a little behind some of those programs, but I don't think the gap's going to be like this forever.
Yeah, and let's continue kind of on that trend with kind of fan support and to quantify it, kind of just attendance over the last. I looked at the last couple of years, and part of this is really just going to be boiled down to stadium capacity. Like I'm very curious, like because UCF in 2022 I averaged 41,542 fans. They had 44,015 this past year in their first year in the Big 12. I wonder if in this first year in the Big 12, if the stadium held 50,000, would they have been bordering on that number as an average? I mean, there's no way of
Stadium
knowing,
capacity
but
math confuses the hell out of me
oh, it's
because
extremely confusing.
Louisville had, I think their stadium was around 45,000 and they decided to expand to 60,000. And the
Mm-hmm.
year that construction was going on in their 45,000 seat stadium, I think they averaged like 38,000. Then they opened the upper deck to get to 60,000. They averaged like 57,000 next year. So like, it's like build it and they will come. I don't know.
I
So
think part of it is when, I mean, I don't know, it just depends on the architecture of it, but I think when you build, I don't know. I don't
like
know for
ticket
sure. This is
prices
just a
lower
theory. I
because
think
there's
it's like some,
more. I don't
yeah,
know.
like if you build an upper deck, naturally the ticket prices in the upper deck will be cheaper. People will be able to have more access and say, yeah, I can get to a game. Not,
Yeah.
you know, if there's only 44,000 seats or 45,000 and they're selling out every game, then you look at the secondary market because they're selling out every game. People know that their tickets are $120. So maybe that's part of it.
I don't want to
I don't
jump
know.
ahead to the news, but UCF is doing a pretty
Yeah.
interesting new ticket promotion. We don't have to go to that now. We'll talk about the news because
Yeah.
it
We'll
doesn't
talk about it later. That's a
impact
little
this that much.
teaser for the news.
But we're
Section.
teasing news that was released
Yeah.
on Twitter like 5 days ago and not by
Yeah.
us. But I think the attendance stat, if you're talking about brand, is definitely the one I care about the least because I think it's
Mhm.
super misleading. Like the biggest, like, do you know off the top of your head right now which Big 12 team has the most fans at its home games?
No. I only look actually I think I only looked at numbers for these big
Okay.
programs that
Do you
we
have a guess?
I mean I would so current Big 12
Well,
to
what
yeah,
the Big
this
12 is. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I don't really have a guess, honestly. I'm West Virginia.
Nope.
That was a bad guess. Texas Tech.
It is not Texas Tech.
Is it Oklahoma State?
It is not Oklahoma State.
Is it BYU?
It is not BYU.
It's not Houston.
It's certainly not Houston. You are
Colorado.
correct about that. It is Iowa State.
No.
60 more than 60,000 fans is usually what they average. Now, I did say it's not BYU. BYU has a similar capacity, and I think they are pretty similar in attendance. But again, the top two in the conference, the only ones who are really getting over 60,000 a game are BYU and Iowa State, hey, that might support you guys all on Twitter. I think BYU is the biggest brand in the conference. So there you go. But Iowa State is definitely not, and they're up there. So attendance is whatever. I think that UCF, I also think that, some other fan bases might disagree, and it's just get ready to learn bounce house, buddy. But that is a tough place to play, and I think it's a lot tougher than some of the larger venues. So I don't get it. I don't look at this and I'm like, man, 10 years from now, UCF better have like built an upper deck and be averaging 60,000. I just don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's going to happen either.
it's funny because like some fan bases got to learn it last year. And I laugh every time I see Oklahoma State fans like UCF instilled fear into Oklahoma
It's
State about the space game because
but
like
it's
I
become a
saw
weird like respect thing. Like whenever it
oh
comes
it
up now,
no it
they're like,
has
oh, like it's so
because
odd.
again teasing news thing they announced a kickoff time for Utah and everything, and I saw an Oklahoma State fan. They obviously didn't know that UCF's already announced the space games to Arizona, but they were like, "Oh, I hope this is the space game for UCF, like because they want Utah to lose, they want Utah to experience that,
And I
the
saw somewhere
magic of the space
completely
game."
separately where Utah fans were like, some Utah fan was like, can't wait to go in their stadium and like kick their ass or whatever. And some Oklahoma, like random Oklahoma State fan replied and was like, I don't know if that's going to happen, man. Like, it's just,
And then I
it's
saw
weird.
people joking because as we're recording, I don't know if it's started. It's probably not starting. It's not
It is
supposed to
not
start on
started.
time. But UCS playing Oklahoma State in the Big 12 baseball tournament, and I saw a lot of UCF fans were saying, "I hope we packed the Space U uniforms to wear
I did not
against
even think
Oklahoma
about that.
State."
I'm sure they didn't, but that would be so funny. Well, Oklahoma State with UCF has had a rough start because UCF's beaten them in a lot of sports since they've.
Yeah, it's the opposite of Baylor.
Yeah, I mean UCF is literally the anti-Baylor. UCF just blew them out in football, even though they were the number 15 team in the country. They beat them twice in men's basketball, including knocking them out of the tournament. They won the series against them in baseball. Like it hasn't been Oklahoma State is not a fan of UCF being in this conference.
Yeah,
So now that I've said all that, of course, you guys know the answer and we don't. Maybe baseball will lose tonight, but
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I didn't even get into the other teams attendance, the other programs' attendance numbers, but I don't really have to. I don't think. Like, I think
you
it's
can maybe
more.
just do the 5-year averages real quick, just so
Yeah.
we don't tease numbers.
The 5-year averages that I actually didn't write down. I just have them in
I
here on
have
my
them. You want
phone.
me to say
Okay,
them?
no, I have them. I have
Okay.
them. So UCS 5-year average, and again, this is weird because the website I looked at did not really say if this accounted for COVID or not. I would
There's
imagine it
no way
omitted
this
COVID
accounts. There's no
because
way
it's
that this
yeah,
includes 2020.
everybody's would
Yeah.
be dragged down because COVID was like for some teams like 0%
Yeah.
capacity. So UCS 5-year average 41,324. TCU's 43,184. Kansas State's is 49,478. Utah's is 48,516, and Oklahoma State's is 54,579. You said that stadium capacity math confuses you. Confused me in this sense, where like I have also have in parentheses like the capacity for each of these programs, and three of them, all four of them other than UCF are over 100%. So it's like, are they just giving out more standing room only
They're
tickets,
all
or
lying.
what's?
None of these numbers are real. I
No,
mean,
I'm
that's
sure,
the
yeah, but
that I hope UCF fans and all fans of the sport understand. I think that's well known, especially if you're a college football fan, that virtually all of these schools lie dramatic. I've been at UCF football games where that stadium is not in recent years, but when I was younger, where that stadium is God, like half full, 60% full. And they're like, we had 41,000 people at the game tonight. Like it's you just lie.
there's a
And
baseline number where they're like,
and when I
yeah, just
say
say it's this.
when I say lie, I don't mean like Terry Mahadris like on the field looking around and then he calls up and it's like I'm feeling like 42K tonight. Like they just everyone kind
Tickets
of like
sold normally, right?
it's usually yeah, and they'll count tickets sold in some stupid ways. Like, oh, you have a season ticket, that is a ticket sold whether you're at the game or not. We gave a block of 200 tickets away to
Yeah,
some charity. Those are 200 people. Like they just count it in the most liberal way possible. And it kind of evens out because everybody does it. So it is what it is.
yeah. Let's go. Do you want to go to coaching next, or do you want to go to on-field success? Because they're kind of a perfect little bit of
You
both.
know what?
But
You know what, man? I trust your
what?
judgment. Whatever you think
All
is
right.
best.
As soon as I say what I'm going to say, you're gonna be like, "Oh, we should have done the other one." Let's do coaching.
I kind of would have liked to start with on-field success, but we can do coaching.
Yeah. Um, this was actually so interesting to look at just because of these programs and where they are like, and this isn't going to say everything because like TCU, Sonny Dykes is only entering his third year, but his first year they went to the college football playoff. They went to the national championship game.
Yeah, and then his second year they didn't make a bowl. So
Yeah. So UCF, obviously Gus Malzahn entering his fourth season, which time has flown. That I was like, he's been here for 4 years.
longest tenured UCF coach since George O'Leary.
That's insane.
Yeah.
He's 24-16 through the first 3 years.
I
That
hate
doesn't
that
sound.
record
I don't
so
like that
much.
record.
I understand there are extenuating circumstances, but God, if you just told me like after his opening press conference that would be the record after 3 years, I think I would have decided to not be a UCF fan to spare myself the pain.
Sonny Dykes, his record's funny because they had that season where they went to the national championship, and then they had the non-bowl season last year. So he's 18-9 through 2 years, which
Wasn't
is
that
not
Frost's record at UCF when he left? 18-9?
19. His would have been
19 and
19 and
8.
7
19 and
or
7, whatever.
19
It
and
doesn't
7, I
matter.
think. Yeah, if I did them, yeah, 19 and 7.
Sonny Dykes also, when I was a young kid, was at Cal and was really bad. When I say I was a young kid, I think it was in like high school. But I remember
You know,
Cal being not good when he was there.
I looked up these records and then I forgot because I saw it when I was looking at his page yesterday. I was like, he was coach at Cal. I was like, I don't remember that. And then when you said that again, I was like, he was a coach at Cal. I saw that yesterday morning when I was looking at this stuff. At Kansas State, Chris Kleiman's entering his 6th year. He's 39-24, which is not as good as I thought he was, or as the record would have been. And then you get to the crazy long 10 years of these next two. Utah's Kyle Whittingham. He's entering his 20th year as their head coach. I think you said he's been here for like 30 years in some
Yeah, he in
capacity,
some
right?
capacity he's been coaching there for like 30 straight years. He
How
started
old
as
is
like an
he? I didn't
assistant
think he was
coach.
that old.
He's 64, I think.
Okay. He's been there a long time. He's 162-79 through
That's
19
crazy.
seasons. And then Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State. He's also entering his 20th year as their head coach. He's 166-79. They both have the same number of losses. Gundy has 4 more wins. But
This is a dumb thing that doesn't matter for UCF fans at all, but I'm going to say it on this podcast because I found it really interesting. Kyle Whittingham, Utah's coach their head coach for 20 years, coaching at that school for 30 years. He went to BYU. Could you imagine if Mackenzie Milton went on to like coach at USF for 3 decades? Can you even
the
fathom that?
dumbest possible example I thought of that. This is the stupidest thing I think I'll ever say on this podcast. My mind immediately went to Alex Golish, who like coached here for 2 years and is now a
That
USF
is
head coach.
not the
Did
same
not
thing.
go here, does not really have any ties here. You're just an assistant.
Plus, he's also
and is now head
UCF's
coach.
future head coach, obviously, once Gus retires. And then my other quick trivia on what's that? I was gonna say it, but I don't remember. What's that rivalry called again? BYU Utah. It has a name.
It does, doesn't it? I don't know what it is though. I'm gonna have to look it up now because it's gonna bother me.
Someone's screaming at us right now in their car or whatever.
Well, I can't hear them, so.
But I just want to point out that the other part of trivia is Kalani Sitake, BYU's head coach, coached at Utah for a decade before going to BYU. That rivalry needs to like get their crap together. They're sharing coaches too much.
Oh, okay. I was right. I just didn't want to say it and be wrong. It was the Holy War.
That's exactly what I went through in my brain. Is I was like 80% sure it's called the Holy War, but I was like, if I'm wrong,
Yeah,
that's a bad thing to say. So yeah, okay.
Weird name.
That does feel like a straight. I don't know. I guess it's fine.
Feels
If
like,
it doesn't
yeah,
bother them, then
I guess not. But yeah, I mean, this is another thing. Like, coaching stability is a tricky thing because when you're Gundy, you've been there for 20 years. You've had some good years, like some really good years. You've also had some really bad years. And then, like, even using UCF as an example, like there was no stability for a few years there, but they were still really good. Like they had Scott Frost for only 2 years and then Heupel for only 3. And, then they went to Gus and like, I don't know. They've fallen off since 2019, but
yep.
You still wouldn't look at that and be like, oh, that's just a completely unstable environment. I wouldn't think. And so
UCF's
and
issue, like, I mean, you talk about the last few years. I mean, UCF's issue is that they're not where their own fan base believes they should be, but I don't think anyone would refer to UCF as a program in crisis or anything like that. They've just been good.
Yeah.
Like everyone wants them to be great and they've just been fine. So which, I think one of the worries me in some ways, because when you look across college football, especially the last 30 years, I think one of the worst curses is some teams end up just stuck being good. Can't get to great. And I do worry about that, but I don't know. I mean, you talk about coaching stability and how you want to rank coaches. It's going to depend on which UCF fan you talk to, right? I think some would say, well, Gus Malzahn, he's a legend. He's upped our recruiting in ways you can't even imagine. He's great. And then other people might say Gus Malzahn had a running back throw a pass on a key 4th down. So I don't know.
Some people, JP Gilbert.
Some people might say that. So I think it just depends on who you talk to.
I just laughed because you said some people might call him a legend. I like seeing him. So he threw out the first pitch of the Rays game yesterday, and seeing him referred to as
Gus Malzahn, to
legend.
be clear, not JP Gilbert, since we said those names pretty close together.
Yeah. Gus Malzahn referred to as a UCF legend, and JP said it was him and Chad Matola, and they said 2 UCF legends. And JP said 2 what? And I was like, wow. I was like, that was kind of weird to see Gus referred to as a UCF legend.
It actually was. I think it was Ryan Bass who tweeted that, right? I think it was just kind of being funny, like, oh, it's a UCF legends, but it was weird to see that next to Gus because I'm like, is he? He's more like a UCF custodian. Like he's been there. Like things haven't been bad. They haven't been great. They've just kind of been. So I don't know. I can't wait until, I was gonna say that sounded bad. I was about to say I can't wait until he's gone, but I don't mean that at all. I don't want him to leave. I want him to be the coach for a long time. I meant I can't wait until we can like when his era is over, see how we end up talking about it. Because I have like the
Mhm.
jury is so out on
Yeah,
Gus. I have no idea how
100%.
we're gonna end up talking about him.
Yeah. And okay, so let's wrap up this part of it before we get into all of the other Big 12 brands that people threw out at us. The AP poll stuff that you looked at. Do you want to run through that? Or I mean, I have it too, but you were the one who looked at it.
Yeah, I would love to run through it if I could find it. Here it is. Okay. Yeah. So I went and looked up. I love looking up. I don't know why. I'm obsessed with the AP poll. Like I will be bored watching TV on like a Wednesday night and be like, I wonder what the 1958 AP poll looked like, and just like go through the teams. And I think it's super interesting.
Okay.
But that's kind of an aside because I could have just said like, oh, I pulled these numbers. But I just want you guys to know that in my spare time, this is what I do. So I just want to take a look at. I mean, this is all what it comes down to, right? It's success of the team, and I wanted to look at the last 10 seasons for these programs. I have a new metric, and we might roll with this on a future podcast. I've decided, and we can talk about it with when people talk about brands. I have a new metric for brand, and I think it's weeks ranked in the AP poll because I think that signals a lot. Like when you have these teams that aren't that good but just stay ranked, or teams that come into a season end up being bad but they're ranked for like the first 5 weeks just because they're whoever. Like I think weeks ranked in AP poll is a huge brand metric. Didn't use
Yeah.
that here though. This is just where they finished the season. TCU last 10 years, they had 4 top 25 seasons, and all 4 of those were top 10 seasons as well. That's kind of weird. That's really like go big or
That
go
is
home.
strange.
You are only in the top
That's
10 if you're ranked.
that's the Marlins. Well, I guess the streak ended. That's the Marlins' only playoff appearances ending in World Series
Yeah.
victories. I think it
For
ended in
like 20 years.
2020.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And TCU was ranked for at least 1 week in 8 of the last 10 seasons. Kansas State has had 3 top 25 seasons in that span. One of those was the top 10 season. They were ranked for at least a week of 7 of the last 10 seasons. Oklahoma State, 6 top 25 seasons. One of those was top 10, ranked in all of the last 10 seasons at some point. Utah, 6 top 25 seasons. One of those was a top 10. They were ranked also every single year of the last decade. At some point, they were in the top 25. UCF's had 3 top 25 seasons in that span. One was a top 10 season. You may remember it. They won the Peach Bowl. And they have been ranked for at least a week in 5 of the last 10 seasons, which isn't bad.
Yeah.
It's not quite where these other teams are, but it isn't bad.
This is something that I don't know if, I mean, there might be some correlation. It probably is just more of a who knows. But the fact that Oklahoma State and Utah are the teams with 20-year head coaches, and they had both had 6 top
Yeah.
25 in the last 10 years, and both have been ranked in each season, each of the last 10 years. There's something to be said there, I think. I'm not sure what it is to be
I'll
said,
tell you what
but
it is. It is stability has become grossly underrated in college football, and I think you're seeing that a lot. I mean, I'll give you 2 recent examples. Everyone thought Mike Norvell should have been fired after his rough
mhm.
start with FSU, and now they just went undefeated until their bowl game. Everyone, Jimbo Fisher, or not Jimbo Fisher, way not the right name to say in this situation. Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, they had a bad COVID
Mhm.
year. Everyone was like, he's got to be fired. He's been there for 5 years. They haven't done it. Then they just went insane and won 3
Mhm.
Big 12 titles, national championship. I think we collectively as a sport are firing coaches way too soon. I think that's what it signals. But
Yeah, and I think there was also just in terms of that, I think that stability might buy some, not all of it, but some might buy some like goodwill. Because think about what happened when Scott Frost left and UCF came in the next season with the same team, a new head coach, and they were like, "Oh, we can't rank them." Like they just
yeah,
finished. What did they finish? I always forget. In 2017, in the final AP poll, were they
you don't
seventh,
know. They were sixth.
sixth?
Yeah.
Okay,
And I
no, I
think
didn't
they
know.
started the next year ranked like 21st or 22nd
I
or
think
something like
so.
that.
Yeah.
And then you look at Cincinnati, who they have their Peach Bowl season. They don't win the damn game, and Luke
hmm
Fickell doesn't leave. So the next year they start that season ranked inside the top 10, which is still crazy to me. But yeah,
I
I do
was
think that's
almost
part
even
of
gonna
it.
say the 20 I might be misremembering this, but even going into 2020, UCF was ranked like 14th.
UCF got as high as 11th in a year where they
Yeah.
finished 6-4 because the brand was strong then, man. I mean, they'd
Yeah,
been
it
on
felt
this
like his hype
insane
had been there
stretch.
for 3 years.
And
So
honestly, I worry because I feel like that brand boost they got from that stretch carried for a while. I mean, look at 2022. They were like fine in 2022, and they spent a good
mhm.
chunk of that season ranked. They lost to Navy and didn't drop in the college football playoff ranking. They were just like, it's a close loss at home to a triple option team. We'll leave you exactly where you are in the poll. So I don't know. This was the first year that it's kind of hard to gauge because also UCF just was never in position where anyone could have seriously considered ranking them since they lost so much so
Yeah.
early. But well, I don't know. I'm curious about that. So it's funny. I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, but that's what these podcasts are for. Is
Yeah.
I'd kind of forgotten. In preparation for this podcast, because I hate myself, decided to re-listen to one of our previous podcasts, and it was our
Mhm.
podcast about UCF being invited to the Big 12. So I was
Okay.
just curious, like where our heads were at, like what we thought was supposed to happen in the first year or first couple years. I had totally forgotten how angry we were that every website on the planet wrote articles about like which of the new group of 5 teams will have the most success in the Big 12, and all of them were Cincinnati because they'd just gone to the Peach Bowl and ended up going to the playoff that year. And it's funny to think about that now and how every single prediction for this coming season, UCF is the only new team being taken even remotely seriously. Like, and I feel good about that I think we as UCF fans all expected that to be the case. But it's just funny how I'm curious to see if UCF is a solid team this year. We will kind of see where their brand's at, because I really do just think it's stronger than Cincinnati's ever was, because I think they might get more credit faster with what they do.
A random example, and this was I was looking through my bookmark tweets recently, and I was unbookmarking some of them that I can no longer go back to. And one of them was tied to an article last summer, I think. It was an ESPN article that was previewing the Big 12, and UCF was in the title. It was like, can UCF make a push for the title?
Oh, I remember that.
And so, like, I mean, at the time, I remember thinking, like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But I guess even then, there was still a little bit of brand, and I guess part of it's maybe just Gus's name. But there was still a little bit there with that. But
I do think UCF genuinely does do a good job just from their administration and their social team, and even just little things like the flashy uniforms and the space game and all that. Like, it just feels like bigger news when UCF is doing well than it does when like Houston's doing well or when Cincinnati's doing well. It's more just like that's a team doing well. And I think that's a testament to the fan base and sort of their social media presence. Of we make a lot more noise when we're doing well than some other fan bases do. And that's honestly trickled into larger college football. I think that as much as people make fun of it because of the whole 2017 national champs thing, it's like whenever you see a UCF headline or, oh, UCF won a game, it's like they're a little more on your mind than seeing that Houston won one, you know?
Yeah. And speaking of social media, we got way more responses, or you got way more responses than I thought. I mean,
I knew I was going to get that many because I've learned long ago that there's nothing people love more than giving their opinion. So if you give them a place to do that, they will do it. I really do appreciate those replies.
Because you tagged me, I was getting tagged every time there was a new one. I was going on Twitter and I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, this is
about that. Sorry.
I was like, an account I've never seen has just weighed in on this thing. I don't even know where to start. I think you were the one, you tallied up kind of like what the responses were, and they were a bit jarring.
I just want to say that I explicitly said in the tweet to not include UCF. So shout out to the two of you who still included UCF in your replies. But yeah, I tallied up the tweet. The question I posed in the tweet was, in your opinion, what are the top 3 brands of the Big 12? The top 3 football brands of the Big 12. I didn't include any more like what that means, because I just wanted to see. Brand is such a, I don't know, it's such an ambiguous term, right? Like, it can mean so many things. So I really didn't want to put any limits on it. I just wanted to see what people think. And that can mean whatever it wants. Maybe to you, brand is how big your stadium is. Maybe to someone else is how much you win, whatever. So I tallied up all the responses we got, and I was surprised. The top 3 by responses we got are BYU, Oklahoma State, and West Virginia. And I was really surprised by that, because BYU is a big brand. I'm not arguing that, but I guess I put more weight on success. BYU hasn't had a top 10 season in our lifetimes, you and I, and I'm 27 and you're 26.
26, yeah.
I don't believe they've been to a major bowl since the 70s. They haven't won a national championship, which they didn't win a national championship, and an undisputed one too, since the 80s. My whole lifetime, they've never been particularly good. So I just don't view them that way. But a lot of people do.
The only recent time I remember them being good was when Zach Wilson was there, but I don't remember, like, they weren't, what was their record?
I think they finished 10-1.
Okay.
Or 11-1. And they had a really good bowl performance. Don't remember who they were playing that year. But it was like their schedule was terrible because of COVID. Because since they were independent, like, everyone canceled their games, and they put. You want me to run through their schedule really quickly for 2020?
Yeah, let's hear it.
We have time. I love when we're at the point of the podcast where I look at the clock and I'm like, we've been talking for over 40 minutes and should probably work towards wrapping up. And instead, I'm like, let's look at 2020 BYU schedule. So they played at Navy, Troy, Louisiana Tech, UTSA, at Houston, Texas State, Western Kentucky, at Boise State, North Alabama, at Coastal Carolina, San Diego State.
Was the Coastal Carolina game like thrown together?
That was the Mormons. That was the Mormons versus Mullets game. That was BYU and Coastal Carolina were both ranked and weren't getting a lot of respect, and both their games got canceled due to COVID, and they were just like, let's play this week.
Because I remember that's when Zach Wilson, or before that was like Zach Wilson had like wrote on his headband like, any will play anyone, I don't know, whatever he said.
Yeah, and Coastal won the game, and it was a whole thing because it was Grayson McCall versus Zach Wilson. That was the one and only good thing that came out of that horrible COVID season, was teams being like, we actually, like, there's nothing stopping us from just flying somewhere and playing a game with that team. Like, there's nothing.
Like, we don't have to sell tickets to it. Like, it's just like nothing logistically like stopping us.
But
other thing about that schedule, real quick,
Yep.
That Navy game was the one where Navy didn't like touch each other. That sounded weird. They didn't have any contact in practice all season or all off season because
Yes.
of COVID, and
They
then went out
they
there and
had
played a
not
game.
they had not tackled since their 2019 bowl game. And
This
then
is
they went
horrible.
out there and played a game, and it went exactly how you would expect it to go for a team that had not tackled. You remember the
What was the
score of that
score?
game?
No.
55-3.
Okay, yeah. That
55 to
was
3.
I remember watching that game because I was like, or it was obviously early in the season. I was like, oh, college football's on. Like, there's nothing else to do right now. I'll watch this BYU Navy game. And I was like, I'm turning this off. Like 3 drives in, I was like, okay, so Navy's just not going to do anything in
I'm
this
not
game.
joking. I think I watched that full game. Because it was also just
Sicko.
it was just entertaining after a while. Like just like how
Sicko.
how high can the score go? But
You watch
anyway,
Navy in real time get more reps with tackling because they hadn't done
I
it.
saw
Like,
there was a point in time of the 2020 football season where I had seen every single time any Navy player had been tackled. Think about
yeah,
that. But
no,
anyway,
it's true.
all that to be said. Oklahoma, so BYU, I got 18 responses for BYU, 17 responses for Oklahoma State, and 12 for West Virginia. Those are the only three that got double-digit responses. West Virginia didn't surprise me as much because when we were kids, like, and they were in the Big East, they were really freaking good. They'd go to the
Yeah.
Orange Bowl and just be awesome and had great players and were fun. I think we've forgotten that the Big East sucked. And they also haven't done anything since leaving that conference. But maybe that's brand, right?
I I think because I remember back when I was a kid, I went to, I think it might have been '07. I went to the USF West Virginia game that year, and USF upset him. It was like a huge deal because back then, like West Virginia was like a huge, like
Yeah.
big thing. But the only time I remember them in recent years being good, they were decent last year. Being good was the one year they think they started like 7-0 with Will Greer
Do you remember
after
what
he
their
transferred
record
from
was that
Florida.
year?
I think they ended up falling off, right? They
They
were like
went
eight
eight
and
and
four or
four.
something.
They went 8-4. And Will
Yeah.
Greer sat out the bowl game. And it was
Mm.
this, whoa, a quarterback sat out the bowl. That was a huge deal. It's so funny that was
What
just
year
in
was that?
2018. 2018.
Oh, because
It
he was
was
a
a
quarterback, I guess.
huge, huge deal that he was sitting out the bowl game. Yeah.
Because Leonard Fournette, I think, sat out LSU's bowl game. I think he was one of like the first guys to opt out of a
I
bowl
think
game.
2016 was the first bowl season where it started happening.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of spiraled from there. But yeah, I so those were interesting. TCU was fourth with 9 responses. Utah was eighth. Kansas State was seventh. Then there were a bunch of schools that got like 2 or 3. It was Texas Tech, Baylor, UCF, Colorado. That was JP Gilbert. I don't know what's going on there. Houston and Kansas. But I think that's 9 of the 16 Big 12 teams. At least someone out there thinks they're one of the top 3 brands of the conference. Wait, did I say 9? It's way more than 9.
You said 9. I don't know. I don't know.
It's 12. I listed
Okay.
12 teams because it's 12 of the 16 because the 4 who no one picked were Arizona, Arizona State, Cincinnati, and Iowa State. So those are the only 4 teams that no one believes is a brand, I guess. But it's interesting. I think it says a lot about what I'm so curious about over the next like 5-ish years, assuming college football doesn't reorganize itself again, which is like always on the table, is if this conference stays like this, where just it's really hard to differentiate these 16 teams, or if some teams start rising. Like, do some teams establish themselves as the new powers, or does it just stay every year it's a new batch of teams on top? I don't know. I think it might be a new batch of teams on top every year.
And that makes it fun, but also might make it frustrating in the years where UCF's not.
It makes it fun if your team's not in this conference. Like if you're just like a college football enjoyer, that's great.
Exactly.
But for you as a UCF fan, it's gonna suck. But
and that's dumb because I looked at it in the lens of like, oh, I just like college football, so like, yeah, like that's a fun conference. But like when I think about it through as a UCF fan, it's like, oh no, this is gonna be what?
I don't know if this is real.
Okay, that's a great way to start this on the podcast.
There is on the college football Reddit account. There's a leaked what someone is claiming to be a leaked screenshot of the loading menu from the new EA college football game, and it's UCF and USF.
Wait, really?
I'll put it up. I'll put up the image for this is gonna look so bad for our YouTube.
Oh,
audience,
like okay.
Yeah, like when you're getting ready to start a game, what the
gotcha. Like team selection thing, or
yeah, team selection. So you got UCF and under it's the gold UCF helmet, and underneath it says UCF Knights, and then there's a little Citronaut logo.
Oh, that's
beneath
sick.
it too. I hope that's real so much. God, I'm gonna if that's not because that's like it's got 2,500 likes on Twitter.
Okay.
If that's fake, I'm gonna be livid, but it's fine. But anyway.
I had a diabolical idea when you were talking before.
Go ahead.
We're not going to do it, but if we redid this podcast with like all these same criteria and did it for basketball,
oh,
it would be
There's
not.
nothing, because the question here was, what can UCF do to be a top brand in the Big 12?
Yeah.
There's nothing they can do to do that for
Well,
basketball,
what
and they
made
don't
me
have to. Like, that's
the reasons
fine.
what made me think about it is when you said that the four teams that no one talked about, four programs that no one talked about, and you said Arizona. I was like, well, if we were doing basketball, like
They'd be
Arizona would be
like,
up there,
yeah,
Houston would be up there, like yeah.
Kansas,
So can't exactly, but
not
it'd be
UCF.
completely different,
Although I
completely
saw
different thing.
someone, I think it was Stephen Leonard retweeted 247 did their like way too early Big 12 basketball power rankings for next year, and UCF was like 11th. And I'm like, hell yeah,
Mm.
out of the gutter.
Yeah, one took one season and some questionable additions to the portal.
they,
Um,
they've made some decisions. It's fine. It's either going to work really well or it's going to get Dawkins fired, and there's going to be no in between. Like, it's literally either going to be like UCF is in the tournament and we've just had an amazing season, or like the program has been set back significantly. I can't wait to find out which one.
it's gonna be fun. All right, we can leave it there, and we'll jump into the football news
It was a
here.
good talk.
Yeah, I think it was a good talk. It was just very interesting about all the responses because it was just another example of how much parity there is,
Yeah, man.
the competition wise, and also like just in terms of brands. It's like it's a strong league from top to bottom, I would say. Like,
It's such a weird league because there are no superstars. There's no like Clemson or I don't know,
and
Ohio State, and then there's no bottom feeder. There's no
that's why
Boston College or Duke or whatever.
you've made the point in the past where it's like it's not a league that would be like ripe for like falling apart anytime soon because I don't
No
think
one
any
wants
like
them.
yeah, no one's gonna like want them. But that it's not that like no one wants them because they're bad. It's just like
No,
they're not those
it's
big.
seriously, it's the reason that the Big 12 isn't going to fall apart is because none of those 16 teams are coveted by the SEC or Big 10. In fact, Florida State and
Mhm.
Clemson aren't even coveted by the SEC or Big 10 at this point. They have the leagues they want. There's not as much TV money out there, but the real reason, and it's why the ACC is having drama right now, it's why the Pac-12 collapsed, is that the ACC has a hierarchy. There's Clemson,
Mhm.
Florida State, and Miami, and they live in a very different bubble than even Virginia and Virginia Tech do. And even those schools, Virginia, Virginia Tech, North Carolina, NC State, they live in a very different world than Duke and Boston College and Syracuse do. Like, there's all these hierarchies, and when you have a league of all, and Cal is in there now, and programs like that. When you have a league, and it's kind of how the Pac-12 was set up too before it collapsed, of all these different teams that all have really different perspectives on how they invest in their athletic programs and what success is, it creates friction. The Big 12 is 16 teams who all think the same damn way and all want the same
Mhm.
damn things. And it's going to make for very frustrating seasons, but it's also going to keep the league together because there is no hierarchy. It's just 16 teams who are banded together by how similar they are. So it's going to be
And
interesting.
yeah, and that's why the league, like, as a league, they're in the sweet spot of like, yeah, the SEC and the Big Ten will be top two, and they will be for long time. But
Yep.
they're in that good spot of like solid league. Like, I think nationally, if they're looking at it, it's like, yeah, that's the third league. So they're not in any danger of falling apart like the ACC
Yeah.
is, and
And I think we all
it's
understand that the ACC is not long for the world, which is sad in some way. I'm
it
not
is sad.
enjoying watching
I'm sad the
multiple
Pac-12
historical
doesn't
conferences
exist.
die. Yeah, like it's not great, but it is nice that UCF's in like the one non-SEC Big Ten league that is not currently being threatened
Yeah,
into destruction. So that's nice.
yeah. All right, football news. As you referenced earlier, UCF is offering this ticket option. They've sold out of season tickets. We talked about that a couple weeks ago, but this is called a bounce pass for the 2024 season. It allows fans to be assigned seats 48 hours before each home game. They're selling them for $210. For, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is kind of just like the fast break pass that we did with the Magic have done, right? It's like very similar idea where like I think it's not a season like that. The Magic one wasn't a season ticket, but they've done that before where it's like you can get a
Yeah, because
select number of games
the
and
fast
then
break
that
pass
day
for the Magic, if you're not a Magic fan, is you just buy it for a set group
six
of
games something
games.
like that.
It
Yeah.
was 6 games. They've sold a few different versions over the years, and then the idea was like it's just kind of luck of the draw where your seats are.
Mhm.
Like we did it one time in college, we got club seats.
Yeah, like it
Yeah.
was just that there was a random preseason game against like an international team, but then like again, like they would I think for the Magic ones, it was like they would assign your seats like that day. So
Yeah.
apparently for UCF, it's 48 hours. It's gonna be based on availability, based on visiting ticket returns, just different things. But I guess
Here's
you're
my
guaranteed a ticket. So
diabolical question.
yes.
Will they wait and see how many students claim tickets and then use this to fill what's left over of that North student section that never fills in?
I don't think that's like I think that's 100%. That's what they said. I think.
Oh,
I think in the
am I offering a conspiracy theory that is what they announced? Is
I
that what
think
I'm
because
doing?
it said based on like visiting team ticket returns, student ticket claim rates or something like
Oh,
that.
okay. Yeah, there you go.
And so yeah, I think so.
We love when we take known information and act like we've discovered something. That's awesome.
What's interesting about that
I like that a lot, actually.
is like if you have the bounce pass, which is a funny name, it's just like talking ball. If you have it and they say, okay, well, not that many tickets are being claimed from students for whatever reason, and they say, okay, your 2 tickets are in this end zone, and then you're in the student section, like that's a completely different experience than
Yeah, that happened to me at an Orlando City game back when they were still in, what was the one they were in before? USL?
USL.
You're
That
probably
hurt my heart.
so mad at me that
hurt my heart so much.
I'm sorry. Bailey has a long history with the USL. Former USL
Intern, yeah.
Intern. Still
Club services intern.
Because if there's one thing you really want to connect your heart to in America, it's a second-tier soccer league. But anyway, when Orlando City
tangent, I'm about to get connected to a second-tier women's soccer league too, because Tampa has a team, and I'm going to care about it a lot, and I'm going to have no one to share it with because you don't live here.
That's great, man. You say you're gonna have no one to share it with. You're gonna text me about that freaking team anyway. You do with the Rowdies and everything else. So I already know it's coming. But anyway, this is all to say that like Orlando City, it was announced that they were gonna go to MLS, and me and my family, because I was like, I think like maybe 15 or 16, we were like, didn't know there's a soccer team here. That's cool. My dad was like, we should go. He literally, I swear to God, he just Googled, was like, they're playing in the championship of this league. We should go. It's like, that sounds great. He just picked like seats that were cheap. It was the Wall. And it's just me, my mom and dad, and like the rowdiest, drunkest, standing the whole game fans you've ever seen in your life. And we were just like, oh, we don't belong here. But it's like, so it'll just be just like that. Like you'll just get like student section going crazy, random family.
Yeah, that's going to be weird. But no, I think it's cool. Like it's nice.
I love it.
Doing that. I think
that's going to up attendance. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. 4-star wide receiver Javon Boggs listed UCF in his top 4, along with Georgia, Missouri, and USC. He'll be making his decision on the 4th of July. So maybe we'll get a boom and some fireworks.
I see.
On the 4th of July. How fitting would that be?
Looks like UCF and 3 bum programs, if you ask me.
Georgia, Missouri is the wild card there.
Missouri's not the wild card because their state passed high school NIL specific rules for that state that has made them competitive in a lot of recruiting battles. But it's so stupid because UCF, we've been talking about, they've been recruiting like crazy, and we're many years into that now. Like they beat out Ohio State for John Walker 2 years ago. They've beaten out Florida for players. They've beaten out Miami, and I still see that highly rated player, and it's like a Final Four with Georgia and USC, and I'm like, wow, like it's still kind of crazy to me.
Yeah. This was something that I think it was like last Friday. This was officially announced, so it's been week-old news at this point. But as you just brought up with maybe a real or fake screenshot,
people think it's fake, by the way.
Really?
Yeah.
That's creative that someone was able to just put that together, though.
Looks really real, but people are claiming it's fake.
That's frustrating. All right, well, that was fun for a few minutes. EA College Football 25 will be out July 19th. So the podcast, I don't know, we might not ever do the podcast again after that date because we'll just be busy.
I want to talk about that, and I'm going to say it on the podcast because that'll make it more likely I follow through on it. I was like, what are you talking about? For this game, there are going to be online dynasty leagues where you can play with your friends and set up a dynasty where you each take control of a team. I don't know enough about how it's going to work yet, but I would very much like to do that for the podcast. There will be 32 slots because they can do up to 32. I would love to do a Pegasus Podcast Dynasty. So if you're interested in that, keep an eye out for that because I think that could be a lot of fun.
Interested in how that would work. Like, are we going to allow anyone to be UCF?
I think it would be most fun if no one is UCF.
No one's UCF.
I don't know. Yeah. We'd have to figure that out because it would be weird if everyone takes over MAC teams and one person joins. It's like I'm Michigan. I don't know. Like I said, there's a lot to figure out because also like I'd have to figure out like what cadence makes sense for like advancing weeks and like if people have to play each other, like how they'd organize that. It's a whole thing, but I would like to try to figure it out. So
it sounds fun. It also sounds like a logistical nightmare.
Yeah, but like
especially if we have 30 listeners who want to join you and I and we do 32 teams.
Well, what I worry about is it'll be more than 30 and then we won't be able to let people in. But we'll have to figure something out. But let's just do this like before I even bother learning more about this. Like send us a tweet, like reply to when this is posted wherever, or swipe up in Spotify or whatever. Just if you're interested, if you would join that, let us know. And if it's like a lot of people, we'll talk about a way to set it up. And if it's not, then I don't have to create a logistical nightmare for myself for no reason. So time will tell.
Yeah. Last piece of football news, which I think is definitely the most exciting piece. Well, I don't know. The college football video game is going to be. I'm excited about that. But this is very exciting for the upcoming season. It was announced on Wednesday that the Black Friday game between UCF and Utah at the Bounce House will kick off at 8 p.m. Eastern time, and it'll be televised nationally by Fox. And that was another like they've made it moment. I was like,
It really
okay,
was, man. But it was more
yeah,
than it's less they've made it. Well, it is, but it's also just confusion. Like I was thinking about if I grabbed you out of the stands, I time traveled and I
okay.
grabbed you out of the stands of a 2019 UCF game. And I was like, you want to know what UCF's Black Friday? Like, how about after that Black Friday game against against US against War
I was
on I
gonna say
four?
if you grabbed me out of the Stanford game, I'd be like, wait, do we go to the Pac-12? Were we playing Stanford that
I
year too?
grab you out of the stands of that USF game in 2019, and I say 5 years from today, UCF is going to be playing on Black Friday, prime time, 8 p.m. on Fox against Utah in a game that likely has conference title hopes on the line. You would be like, what the hell happened? Like it just none of that sentence goes together. Like every
Did
line gets more confusing.
did you know that that was legitimately 5 years from that day?
No.
That USF UCF game was on November 29th, 2019.
Is that's actually
That's
really weird.
kind of crazy.
I didn't do it that. I just
Um,
was trying to do 5 years ago, but okay.
I mean, I looked up because I was like, yeah, obviously would have been around there. And I was like, when was the last time maybe that UCF had a Black Friday game on the 29th? And I looked up UCF USF 2019,
I see through
November
time, man.
29th.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it feels like a fever dream, but a good one.
I'm also I think what's it called, is the Mandela effect, when you think something happened but it didn't, or you think something existed that didn't.
It's like yeah,
Um,
like a groupthink thing. Like everyone thinks
yeah.
something occurred, or you know.
Well, when that kickoff time came out yesterday, I was like, oh, like let me add it to the calendar or whatever. And then I was thinking like, oh, let me add the other kickoff times that have been announced to the calendar. No other kickoff times
I
have been
was gonna
announced. I could
say
have
this is our
sworn
first kick
we
time.
got some early season kickoff times, but maybe that
Nope.
was last year. That
Yeah.
literally might have been I thought about it last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just that's the first
This is
kickoff
our
time we
first
got.
one.
8 o'clock on Fox. That's
Very
exciting.
excited.
Yeah.
Very, very, very
I'm also
excited.
very nervous. That's gonna be, I don't know. I mean, we want it to be a very big, like significant game, but it's just going to make it even more.
You're so nervous, and it's gonna be like Cam Rising got hurt 3 games into the season, and Utah's like a 4-win team. UCF fell off and
UCS
was never that
five
good.
and
It's like
six.
4-7 Utah
Yeah,
versus 6-5 UCF, and it's just a completely meaningless game that no one watches.
could be. I don't know.
Or it's a game where the winner goes to the Big 12 title game and the loser doesn't, which I think is absolutely a thing that could be on the table. Or at bare minimum, one team might have the ability to spoil that for the other team.
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be a lot. Um, Speaking of a lot, game of the week is a lot of games. Hopefully, UCF baseball is in the Big 12 tournament. They played one of the most ridiculous games I'd seen in a while against Cincinnati on, what was that, Tuesday. Um, they beat Cincinnati, so they got into the winners bracket. Then they got lucky to see Texas Tech beat Texas, so they got Wednesday off, and then Oklahoma State beat Texas Tech. So now still in the winners bracket side, UCF's playing Oklahoma State. I don't know if they started yet, but like tonight, as we're recording this, you'll know as you're listening to this the result of that game. But a loss, UCF goes to the losers bracket. I think would need to then beat Texas Tech to play Oklahoma State again. And if they win, then they're in the semifinal. The weird thing about the Big 12 tournament, other than the whole, if you're the higher seeded winner of one game, then you get a day off, and if you're lower seeded, you have to play another game. Is once it gets to the semifinal, it's single elimination. So even if UCF loses this game to Oklahoma State and then can beat Texas Tech, they just have to win that semifinal game. They have to beat Oklahoma State once, then they get to the finals. Saying all of that, I'd say, I don't know, another win or hopefully two, and they're in the NCAA tournament. Because
Help
I
me
think they
out.
already have a strong case.
It's still double
What?
elimination right now, right? Like they can't lose tonight while we're recording. Or
They
they can
can
lose.
lose.
They can't be booted from the tournament tonight with a
Correct.
loss. Okay.
Yes.
By the way, people have
Um,
swung back to now they believe the screenshot is real again, and it's being posted by all the big accounts. So
it's
I
a
don't
roller
know.
coaster.
It is. But UCF's like sort of going viral because also USF fans are mad because you can see their rating in the screenshot. It says they're a 77.
Now I feel like it's real, because I feel like if a
That-
UCF fan made it, they would have made USF like 59,
yeah,
and
I don't.
then I
So
don't
the
know.
reason some people were saying they thought it was fake is because I guess it looks super similar to ESPN's graphics package they use for games. So people are like
Oh,
that someone just pulled ESPN's graphics, but I don't know. A lot of the people think it's real, so I don't know.
I don't know. But anyway, yeah, UCF baseball hopefully can keep winning some games. I mean, hopefully they win the Big 12 tournament and get an automatic bid. But the deeper they go into this, the better their chances are of making a regional, and that's a huge success, obviously, in year one for Rich Wallace. So exciting times. I'll be watching it closely as soon as we finish this, whenever the game starts. because I know
Yep.
the conference tournament, it's happened. It happens in every conference tournament, but games just get pushed back further and further. And
Yeah. I mean, it is
the fact that
9:20 and
it's,
the game has not
yeah,
started.
yeah, so it's gonna
But
be a late
since
night.
you guys are listening to this tomorrow, let me go ahead and say congrats to UCF on their win against Oklahoma State.
Hate when you
Good
do
for
this.
them. Good for them.
Hate when
By
you
the
do
way,
this.
I just noticed too, as I'm looking at this graphic, so it's the team selected to play it as your UCF and USF, and in the middle it pops up the War on I-4 graphic.
Oh,
I need
cool.
this to be real. I need this
Yeah.
screenshot to be real.
Oh, I can't wait for that game. It's less than 2 months away.
I will
It's
say that
great.
UCF's helmet shade is correct. So who knows?
Maybe it's real. Tweet of the week.
Tweet of the week. Sorry, I was looking at the photo. Guys,
Oh, I
I care
lost you
about
there.
this game more than I care about myself. Like I can't wait for this game to come out. But anyway, tweet of the week. Love that we brought up USF organically because we don't get to do enough USF tweet of the weeks anymore. Since you're looking puzzled.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I know what tweet you're going to
Oh,
reference.
okay. Well, I don't know if you saw it, but I loved it. And the Big 12 Conference tweeted the news that UCF and Utah will be playing on Black Friday at 8 p.m. on Fox. Bold Disclosure, which is that really weird USF
Oh,
account we've seen around, they quote tweeted the Big 12 tweet and said Black Friday special with 3 of the like holding in a laugh emojis and said what you get in a conference without rivalries. Do USF fans think for a second that it being announced that UCF is going to face the Big 12 title favorite at home on Black Friday in primetime on Fox in a game that was announced with a lot of fanfare as us being like, oh, God, we could have been playing 4-7
yeah.
USF though. Like, what are you talking about? And this is coming. I'm like one of the few UCF fans who was like, wish the War on I-4 was still happening. Even I am like, what are you? The sense of self-importance with that fan base is just remarkable. I have never
It's
been
so
able to.
misplaced. It's unbelievable.
They are genuinely, and I know that like I don't have a lot of room to talk about delusion or being unhinged as a UCF fan since we
Yeah.
decided we won a national title, which I respect and support, but still sometimes I feel like I can't call it fan base is delusional because people view UCF, but I seriously believe that USF fans, at least on social media, are one of the most delusional fan bases in the country. Like the disconnect for them between what they are and the standing they think they hold is crazy to me. I have never seen anything like it.
Dead serious. I was going to say, I don't know as far as UCF delusion. I don't know if the national championship is like even a top 3 reason I would say UCF fans are delusional.
What would you, should we rank really quickly, like
Oh,
top
I
three
mean,
reasons?
I don't know. No, I don't have anything in mind. I feel like I'm going to just draw a blank. There has to be something, but there are
I
reasons.
I don't know. They started a conspiracy because Boise's turf is blue. I don't know. The things they do in a
Yeah.
given year.
The
Tried to
general,
get tried to get the DJ fired at one point
yep.
this season.
Pretty much get any given topic of last season's, like each week to week there was something new. I need to go back and bookmark the
That
list because
tweet,
someone put a
yeah.
list together and I just need to reference it because
I think
there
what's
was
great about
every week.
UCF fans is that I never know what they are going to decide that they will rapidly care about. Like it will
There's
be
a
the most random thing, and
there's a
suddenly it is like
parallel.
a huge deal.
There's a parallel to that because it's like out of nowhere, like this, you would think they were going to complain about this and then it's a completely different thing.
Yes.
That's how I feel with the podcast.
Yeah, we've
Because like
talked about
we'll
that
talk about
before.
something, yeah, we'll be like, oh, this is like people aren't going to like this, and then they'll take a completely like a throwaway comment and be like, I can't believe you said this, and
No, we've
it's
been doing
just
this podcast almost 3.5 years, and that is like the most like
it's a UCF fan trait.
I will say something and I will in my head be like, probably should not have said that, and it will never come up again. But then some random thing I did not give a second thought to. I go on Twitter and people are like, Christian is an idiot. It's
It
interesting.
feels like a bit. Like it feels like I don't know. There's some kind of group chat of our listeners who like get together and like, all right, what's the thing that we're gonna like pick at them about this week?
It does feel
I don't know.
orchestrated. I don't know what's up with you guys.
We have to look into that.
I love you all though.
Clay
Actually,
Pasco's
I
probably
don't love
behind
you
it.
all. There's a couple of you I'm not big on, but the rest of you are great.
Oh
By the
goodness.
way, I
All right.
promise you, if you heard that and you're like, oh, does he mean me? If you're thinking that, it's not you. So don't worry. You're fine.
Yeah. And those of you that he was talking about that are listening to this, thank you for listening, and thank everyone for listening. We appreciate it a lot. Keep coming back. We're getting into that time of the year where we're getting like we actually sometimes there's parts of the off season where you and I are like, what are we going to talk about this week? We have some things planned coming up
We
that are
do.
kind of staples of this podcast. So I'm excited about that.
Birthday
Getting
music.
into June, birthday music coming back up. It's gonna be great. But until episode 208 next week, follow us on Twitter at Bailey J Adams 22, at by CA Simmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. Thank you guys so much for being with us, and we will talk to you next week.
Bye, everybody.